In this video, I'm going to start with the standard form of a quadratic equation. I'm going to complete the square on it in order to derive the quadratic formula. So many of us know the quadratic formula is that x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of the quantity, b squared minus 4ac, and that's all over 2a. And I mean, they have songs about that and all kinds of stuff, right? You're going to learn that in high school, algebra or algebra 2 or something. And that helps you to solve for the values of x that will always make this true no matter what coefficients or constant value they give you. Okay, so the first thing in completing the square is to divide every single term by the coefficient of your x squared term. So we're going to divide everything by a. And in fact, we're doing it on the right side as well. It's really the division property of equality. Well, what happens is that these a's cancel, and you're left with x squared, and then plus b over a x plus c over a equals 0. Okay, so the next step of completing the square is to take this constant term over here that's on the left side with it and just bounce it over to the right. So we'll have x squared plus b over a x equals negative c over a. Because when it's positive on the right side, we'll move it over to the left and we'll change that sign of it. Okay, so at this point, we need to find this linear term's coefficient right there, this b over a. We need to cut it in half, and then we're going to square that and add that to both sides. Oh gosh, what does that look like? So this b over a is the coefficient of my linear term x. So I'm going to take half of that, so I'm going to multiply it by 1/2, and I'll get b over 2a. And then I take that whole term, whatever it is, and I'm going to square it. And in doing so, I'm going to form a perfect square over here on the left side that I can factor. And but whatever I do to the right side, I got to do the left side. So I'm going to add this b over 2a term that's being squared, which if we simplify it would be b squared over 2 squared is 4, and a squared is, well, just a squared. So I'm going to add to both sides this b squared over 4a squared term. And I'll make a little division right there so we don't get confused. Okay, so we have this whole big thing right there, which I know might look a little ugly. But we're going to factor, using a perfect square, this left side. And when we do that, we're going to have x plus, and then it's going to be b over 2a, that quantity squared. Okay? So then on the right side now, we're just going to get common denominators of 4a squared. So we'll multiply the top and bottom over here by 4a there, and by 4a there. And when we do that, I'll have a negative 4ac over 4a squared, and then plus b squared over that 4a squared. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn these around, so I'll take this term and put it in front right there. So we have this x plus b over 2a, that quantity is squared. And on the right, I'm also going to put over one denominator. b squared minus 4ac all over this 4a squared term. Okay, so I know it's I know all the steps kind of get jumbled. Try to leave a space in between here so it's a lot nicer looking. Okay, so we have this perfect square right over here, and we have this jumbled mess over on the right side. And in order to release this x, I need to take the square root of both sides. But when you take the square root of both sides over here, I'm going to need a plus or minus to go in there with it. So let's bring everything down and see what this looks like. Well, when I take the square root of a perfect square, I just have this x plus b over 2a that's now released from that quantity squared. And this equals plus or minus, and it's the whole square root here of this b squared minus 4ac all over this 4a squared that we have as the denominator. But remember, when you're taking the square root of a fraction like this, it can also be written as the square root of b squared minus 4ac over the square root of 4a squared. Wow, but isn't the square root of 4a squared just 2a? So I could come back over here and write x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now it's really starting to shape up. So in order to finish isolating my x, I need to subtract both sides by this b over 2a. So I'll end up with x equals, I've subtracted it, so now it's minus b over 2a, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, that is really nice because look, I have common denominators. So my final quadratic formula looks like x equals the opposite of b, plus or minus. I have b squared minus 4ac, and all of that goes over 2a. So right here is my derivation of the quadratic formula, and I found that by taking the standard form of a quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and I just completed the square on it. So what's nice now is that for any coefficients or constants, we have a, b, or the constant c, no matter what you have for a quadratic equation, you can always set it equal to 0 and then just plug it right into this formula and it will give you the values of x that are solutions of that equation.